Good evening. We are back again, and you are watching Coffee, Candidates, and Conversation. We have a special guest with us, but before we introduce our guest, I want to let everybody know if you're new to watching, here's what this is about. Coffee, Candidates, and Conversation is a piece we put together to provide voters an opportunity to have a one-on-one type experience with the candidate. We know that because of COVID-19, we can't possibly arrange as many opportunities for candidates to interact with voters and for voters to, in turn, interact with candidates. But what we can do is bring candidates into the place we've all spent a lot of time, and that is home. That's why we're here today. And our special guest today, his name is Mark Pickrell, and he is a candidate running to represent the state of Tennessee in the United States Senate. Welcome to Candidates Coffee and Conversation, Mr. Pickrell.
Thank you. I really appreciate it. This is great.
Yeah. Well, I saw you lifting your mug earlier. I have my Shelby County Democratic Party coffee mug. This mug is getting a lot of mileage, and I think my caffeine intake has probably doubled since I started this series. But let's sort of dive in.
Can you wait? First, can you send me a mug? You got to give me a party gift for this. So
we can definitely do that. We can definitely do that.
See, I don't have any writing on this. I will get some writing the next time.
Yeah, and I'll tell you what. We'll make note and we'll get you a Shelby County Democratic Party mug so that you can have the good coffee. Yeah, the good coffee. Now, we like to have fun on the show, and we also like to sort of get around some of the typical speak that we hear from candidates. You know, we always hear the question, tell me why you're running, and it always comes out like that. But our voters want to know something different. Our voters want to know something about you that we cannot Google, that we won't find in your campaign literature or on your website, and that we likely would not learn about you if we work with you in your professional capacity.
Okay. A few years ago, we had a cleaner of I run a small company, and we had a cleaner, and he and I became kind of friends. And it turns out he makes small reed Indian flutes. And so for Christmas one year, he gave me a small reed Indian flute that he had made. And so when I want to relax, I go into my office at my house and I shut the door and I sit there and I play just random music on that small Indian flute that he gave me. And that's one of the best gifts I've ever gotten in my life because it's been hours and hours of just pure relaxation. And I have never put that on the web or talked about that with anybody. So that is something very few people know about me.
All right. I think our voters are feeling a little closer than they were before. And man, what kind of wood? What's the flute made out of?
It's a reed. It's literally if you think about it, it's a reed. It's probably about an inch and a half. It's oval in shape, and then it's got the hole. It's got 6 holes in it, and then it's got a little block that gives you the whistle sound that makes the reed blow. You've heard that calm, smooth. It's Indian kind of music. Well, that's what it is. It's a reed flute. It's awesome.
Oh man, nice, man. Well, I like that. I'm a musician of sorts myself, and so I'm always excited to learn that we have candidates who are musically inclined and who turn to music and view it as therapeutic and fun. And so, so let's just dig a little deeper in terms of getting to know you before we get to some of these issues. We know that oftentimes candidates and elected officials alike, once you step into that arena to run for office or hold a public office, your life becomes the sum of your constituents' concerns. So, but the thing we forget is that you are also a voter. So let's take that candidate's head off and set it to the side for a moment. Let's talk about the voter. What for you as a voter is the biggest issue that's on the table, and why?
Well, as a voter, and I have to add as a candidate, I'm motivated by economic issues. I got into this race because I had been worried that for many, many years, decades even, we've been making one change after our laws to the other that has made our economy more and more unstable and more unfair. And I got into this race actually pretty late, last day you could get in, because COVID hit. And I thought with COVID, we as a society might finally be able to make those choices to reverse a lot of the changes we've made to our laws that have made our economy worse and not better. And I think that the people of Tennessee, and including me as a voter, are ready for those changes. I've been ready for them for a long time, but I think ready for them. And I think Tennessee voters and American voters are ready to make those changes that we need to make to turn this economy around. And that's really my main motivation. Uh, Within that, when we talk about unfairness, it's a whole variety of unfairnesses that we have. We're going to get to, I know later in the discussion, a discussion about social justice and about racial justice. But I firmly believe that we cannot have social justice in our country. We cannot have racial justice in our country until we have economic justice in our country. And so we built this system that actually benefits wealth, which is another way of saying it actually benefits white people. And instead, we got rid of all those protections that made our economy more mobile for everybody, regardless of how much wealth you had, and made protections first and foremost for people who worked for a living. And so those are my main motivations as a voter. That's what I care about for our country. But it's also, therefore, what motivates me for running as a candidate.
Okay. Well, then this seems like a good place to pick as a follow up. Then, what do you see for us as an opportunity to improve economic growth in Tennessee?
It's a whole lot that we have to do on the federal level. I would encourage you to look at my website because I have 7 basic points. And then in the detail, I have 16 legislative changes that we need. It's everything from changing how the Federal Reserve operates to changing how we spend money on military uh, wars abroad, to changing how we deal with our deficit, to changing how we deal with taxation of dual working households. Those are all changes that we have to make. And I've got 16 of them on my website. But those are some of the changes that I think we have to make in order to turn this economy around. The most important ones have to do with Wall Street versus Main Street. We got to restore Glass-Steagall, which was a law that protected us for 70 years that we got rid of. And after we got rid of it, our economy became more and more unstable. And then we also need to change how we tax capital gains so that we can start addressing these benefits that people who make money from wealth have that people who make money from working don't have. And so those are the sorts of changes that we should make, in my opinion. And they're all on my website there. They've been on there from day one because that's really my main impetus for running as a candidate.
Okay. Uh, well, could you tell voters who may be uninitiated and would like to hear you speak on it? You call it, is it the Siegel Act?
It's Glass-Steagall, yeah.
So Glass Eagle, could you give our voters who are listening, I guess a simple of a breakdown of what that act covered?
Yeah, happy to talk about it. So the last time we had the sorts of problems that we have now was in the Great Depression. And one of the things that we as Democrats did during the Great Depression was we separated commercial banking from investment banking. We separated bankers for Main Street from bankers for Wall Street. And what that does is, as long as you keep your money system connected to your productive economy, that is the production of goods and services, then you can have stability. And we had economic stability for 70 years. Now, then, once we got rid of Glass-Steagall in the 90s, we had the Asian financial crisis, the long-term capital management crisis, the NASDAQ bubble, the housing bubble, the great financial crisis of 2008, and now the Federal Reserve crisis of 2020. So we've had more and more bigger and bigger instabilities in our system because what has happened is by getting rid of Glass-Steagall, we separated money from our real economy. And when you do that, you actually don't know, you've lost all your ability to keep things stable and know how to maintain the economy on a stable trajectory. And so what we've done is we it's like a boat where you were going along fine for 70 years on the straight and narrow, and then all of a sudden you take your rudder off and you start rocking back and forth, and you wonder, well, what happened here? Well, the answer is we got rid of the protection that we gave ourselves in the Depression that kept us stable for 70 years. And now, unfortunately, we have an unstable and unfair system because we've disconnected money from work, so to speak. And so what we need to do is reconnect money to work. It's going to be painful. I'm not promising a rose garden here. But in order for us to build a stable economy, to have a foundation that works, we are going to have to reconnect money to work in a way that we haven't for many, many years. And so, I mean, that's in a nutshell why that's such an important thing. And most people don't understand why things have gotten worse. Why do we have such great income inequality in our country? Why do we have bigger and bigger financial crises in our economy? Most people don't understand it. I have to say I do. And that's what motivated me to run, is because I know how to fix our problems. And so I decided to run and tell people, hey, this wasn't by accident. It was by design. And we can turn it around as Democrats. We can turn it around and we can make it better for ourselves and for our children and grandchildren. We just have to turn the direction of this boat, which is our economy. And so that's what I'm talking about when we go back and reverse some of the changes we made, Wall Street made, Washington made, that are really hurting us right now. And most people don't understand that, but it's what I've been looking at and studying as a lawyer for many, many years. And so it's when I look at those changes in the law and I see that they're going to create problems, and when those problems crop in, at some point I got to say I got to do something about it. And I decided to run for Senate.
Okay.
Does that make sense, Mr. Harris? Does that make sense at all? I mean,
it makes a lot of sense. And I was processing a follow-up question, which is, and I think voters would love to hear, a breakdown of this. What would you say if you had to identify, one or two causing or contributing factors to the wealth gap or the expansion of the wealth gap in a way that, voters would be able to really digest? If you could tell us one or two, maybe even three of the contributing factors, which ones would you identify?
Sure. I'll start out with getting rid of Glass-Steagall. That was a big mistake. Treating capital gains tax-wise better than we treat income from work is a huge and negative effect on our economy. Just imagine what we're saying is when you make money by not working, we're actually going to charge you lower taxes than when you make money by working. That's got everything backwards. From my perspective as a Democrat, we need to take care of working people first and foremost, and Wall Street second. What happens is when you get rid of Glass-Steagall and when you advantage capital gains by not working, you tax not working at a lower rate than working, you start to create a culture, a mentality of get rich quick, of getting something for nothing, of devil take the hindmost. It's an attitude. It's an attitude of instability and insecurity as opposed to an attitude of productive work, fairness towards all, and steady growth of our economy. So when you talk about what do we need for economic growth in Tennessee, which is what you have on the table, what we need is steady growth over time, not unstable growth, up and down, more and more crises. So returning to Glass-Steagall, not giving an advantage to income from not working. Some of the Federal Reserve policies, we've got a central bank. They have a very important job. But when they start to cater to Wall Street and make sure that Wall Street is okay with their bailouts and ordinary people are not okay at all, then you've got that separation between our productive economy and people who work and Wall Street and people who make money from their wealth. And the Federal Reserve is a big part of that. So you've seen, if you go to my website, you'll see that we need to define the inflation target that the Fed should have. We need to make sure that we protect pensions by having at least long-term rates, having a basic floor under them that we've gotten rid of. We used to require moderate long-term rates, and the Fed has been so scared of dealing with these ups and downs of these crises that they got rid of that entirely. Those are the sorts of changes we have made in the last 20, 25, 30 years that if we will undo them, we can return to a stable growth and fairness, particularly for people who work for a living. And so I've got a lot of ideas, a lot of legislative proposals on my website. They've been there from day one. But the basic idea is returning to an idea that is one that you are familiar with and everybody's familiar with. Fair day's wages for a fair day's work, being able to live based on what you make as a worker, and people across the board being treated fairly as workers. That's really the heart of why I'm a Democrat. I think it's what the Democratic Party has always stood for and should always stand for. And I'm running for this office because I believe I can help us turn back into the direction we always knew we should be on. And we left our way. I mean, Washington and Wall Street got together decades ago and they started working against the American people. I want us to return back to, particularly as a Democratic Party, to return back to an understanding that our job is to help working people and to build a stable economy that grows over time. And that is what it means to be a Democrat. So that's why I'm running.
Okay. Awesome. Awesome. Well, listen, voters, we need to take a pause for the cause. And so we're going to play an ad for you, a commercial that's going to share some very important information for you. So stay tuned and pay attention to this commercial. It's got one ask of you, and make sure that you follow through with what we're asking you to do. And then we'll be right back and we'll start our lightning round and we'll get into a lot of issues and you will really get to know more about our guest today, Mr. Mark Pickrell. So we'll see you in a moment. All right, we're back, and you are watching Coffee, Candidates, and Conversation. We're here with our special guest, Mr. Mark Pickrell, who is running to represent the state of Tennessee in the United States Senate. So we're about to start the lightning round. And in the lightning round, we're going to cover an array of issues. And so for each issue that we place on the screen, we want to hear from Mark Pickrell on it. And we hope to keep the answers to about a minute and a half. But if we need to go longer to adequately address a topic, then no worries. We'll do that because we want the voters to hear what you have to say. And we want voters to have as much information about each candidate going in to the polls so that they can make the most informed decision. All right. Are you ready? Fair enough?
I'm ready.
Okay. So I think we have a really good transition question to kind of kick off the lightning round. And, you know, we talked a lot about the economy. We talked about how we can, you know, what some of the factors were that have led us to where we are in terms of, you know, having another crisis, financial crisis. So can you answer this question for us? What is a livable wage?
It's a different amount in different parts of the country, but it is something that is much higher than our current minimum. An individual, much less a family, a single parent, or a family of four. And so we know that we have not changed our minimum wage for many, many years. I don't even know exactly how many it's been, but it is probably needs to be at least twice what it is now to have kept up with urban inflation. And so we know that a livable wage is probably at least $15, even for an individual or a single parent. And it may be more for somebody who has a family and has two people working. Even at minimum wage today is probably not adequate. So, in my opinion, a livable wage is at least $15 an hour, probably higher throughout the
Okay.
country.
Okay. Well, let's tap into another area. I'm going to put up a statement, and we're transitioning to a different category.
Okay.
So we have actually, you know what? This is a really good one. This is a really good one for you. I think you'll enjoy this. Healthcare access for the middle class versus access for the poor and elderly. And,
Yep.
and so, in line with that, here is the consideration. Middle class struggles to pay deductibles and medical bills, while poor
Yep.
people struggle to pay insurance premiums. So,
Yep.
what are your thoughts on that?
Well, from day one of my campaign, I put a three-pronged approach for addressing healthcare insurance in this country for this very reason that you address here. There's a spectrum of needs. Not everybody has the same needs. And so I think that the best way to deal with flexibility and availability and affordability, the three goals we want to have for everybody, is to have a three-pronged approach where we have Affordable Care Act plans that are available and are available across state lines, that we have insurance premiums that are available for accident, disease, things like that, that are true health insurance where you don't have any pre-existing conditions covered. And then we need to have an opt-in to Medicare where you can have an income-based sliding scale to get access to Medicare. If we do those three things, in my opinion, we will solve the problem that you addressed on the screen here. We know that even with the Affordable Care Act, between 15 and 20% of people do not have any insurance at all, and they would like to have some sort of insurance, even if it's higher deductible. And so that's why we can have people have some high deductible plans. But for people who have chronic conditions or pre-existing conditions, or for poor people, we want to make sure that everyone has access to health insurance regardless of the amount of income they have. And so if we had an opt-in to Medicare where people pay a premium based upon an income sliding scale, then with those three prongs, we will have full accessibility, we will have maximum affordability, and we will have maximum flexibility. And so that's why from day one of my campaign, I had this three-pronged approach to healthcare. And as you have addressed it here, I think it actually solves all the problems that you're talking about in your two questions here. And that's been my goal from day one and will continue to be my goal.
Okay. Okay, I like it. Well, I think we're about to tap into another one of the questions that relate to money, but just in a different way. What about the security of Social Security?
Well, we have to make sure that we keep those promises. And one of the things that we can do, for example, is we know there are changes both from demographics, and so we've been looking at those as a country. But also originally, Social Security was intended to be insurance for people who could not work. And so you were not originally supposed to get Social Security if you had a job. One of the reasons for that is because we wanted to give entry positions available for younger people. And so I think if we know that we can probably extend the existing life of Social Security right now by just making that one change to returning to what was in Social Security for 60 years. And so that's one change. But I also think we can supplement it in a much easier way and disconnect people's retirement from their work. Social Security is disconnected from retirement work. You have your Social Security once you've earned it, no matter what your job is. Well, there's something called the Simplified Employee Pension, which we have at my company, and we instituted it so that everybody could get and build up on their own pension plan, separate from us as an employer, because we might go away one day. A lot of people have seen their employers go away, and the question is what happens to their pensions. But if we give everybody the chance to have their own pension, and if we shore up Social Security, then we can guarantee everybody a promising future in retirement after a full lifetime of work. And so those have been on my website from day one, like the healthcare plan and like my financial market reforms. And I put this sort of thing in there from day one because these are changes we can make. They sometimes require us to reverse some bad choices we made recently. But if we do so, we can make something that is solid and strong and stable, not just for people older than me, not just for people my age, but also for young people too. And that's important because part of our job as a society is to maintain connection intergenerationally. But we have an obligation to those older than us, and we have an obligation to those who are much younger than us to make sure that we have an economy that's stable and growing and is structured to take care of everybody throughout their working life and beyond. And so that's what I've done on my website. That's what I've done on my campaign platform, and that's what I intend to keep doing. Sorry if I
Okay.
went over, but
Yeah.
these are important to me.
Well, let me ask this question, and in lines with issues with affecting our economy, and when we think about what's going on with the the in your face exposure to our healthcare system problems, uh, what do you think of America's? How would you rate America's response to COVID-19 on a scale from 1 to 10, with 1 being really bad and 10 being absolutely excellent? And so, and then after you rate it, either way, can you tell us 3 things that you would that you would have done differently or better?
Well, I can't say that I would have done anything better because when you're responding to a new thing and when you're trying to make decisions with inadequate information, then I personally think that one of the things that we should not do is tear one another down. So I'm not going to do that. I think America's response as a people is a 10. We have voluntarily self-isolated since March. We have worn masks. There have been occasional problems in areas, but as an overall country, I think the American people have responded to this epidemic by caring about their fellow man, by trying to take those steps to protect society. And I think that is something that we as a people should be very proud of. Government's response is like I probably hit or miss. I mean, in general, I think that we may have shut our economy down too much at first, and then we may have opened up too slowly. But we got some spots that never shut down, and they're starting to be hot spots. I think some of the sending people back to nursing homes and that where they could infect other people, and a lot of people died. That's a huge error, and that's something that we should not repeat. So like I say, in general, I think the American people have been awesome. I can tell you this where based on what I know now, back when this started, it looked like and the data indicated that between 3 to 5% might die who got this disease. That's a lot. That kind of number deserves to shut down everything, send everybody home, keep this thing from spreading. I mean, if you told me that if we drove cars for the next 3 months, 3 to 5% of the people who drove cars would die, we would agree, let's stop that. Now that we've had a little bit more time under our belt and we've learned a little bit more about this new pathogen, then what we've learned is that it looks like for certainly for people who are under 70 that and people who do not have comorbidities, that their death rate is probably 0.04%, 0.08%, something like that. So with that new data, what we probably should do is return back to as much a normal life as possible with the following caveats. One, people who are particularly vulnerable need to still be protected and need to isolate to save their own lives, and we should support them in that situation. In workplaces, places indoors, you got to wear masks, and you got to stay out of indoors as much as possible, and still get on with your life. And then we have to socially distance everywhere, particularly outside and certainly inside, even if you have masks. And so I think that in one of the jobs of the legislature, one of the jobs of the Senate for the whole country, and one of the jobs for the state legislature is to set those rules where we as a people can all reach agreement and say, you know what, we now know enough that we can assess the risk and we can make collective decisions about how to deal with the risk and how to take care of one another, knowing that some of us are going to be hurt, some of us are going to die from this. But we also know, just like with cars, we know people are going to die. We make those choices about what kind of risks are acceptable or not. And that's the job of a legislator. And so I can tell you, if I were in the Senate, I would be working with everybody in the Senate and everybody in the House to try to come up with those rules that will give us maximum freedom while giving the most reasonable protection of health and safety and supporting the most vulnerable among us. That's to me, that's kind of what it is to be a Democrat, frankly. That's in a nutshell, that's what it is to be a Democrat. And so I think that's what we should do in the Senate. It's what we should do in our state legislature here.
Well, here's a follow-up then, and in line with talking about um, deciding which risks to take when there are no perfect solutions. What about this? the threat of Betsy DeVos and Donald Trump to decrease funding for school districts, they go all virtual.
That is the sort of bomb throwing that we have got to stop. I mean, as every city and every locality tries to figure out what's best for it, one of the things those of us in Washington should do is have the humility to say, I don't know what's right for everybody. But I do know it's my job to support everybody, every locality's decision about what they think is best for them. And it's probably going to be different for different cities and different parts of the country, and not cities, rural areas, suburban areas. They're probably all going to require a little bit of a different thing. And so to say that one size fits all, or worse yet, that I'm the grand poobah who knows what everybody needs, is part of the problem. It's not how to solve the problem. It's part of our problem. And so we should not be decreasing federal funding at a time where we probably need to be increasing all funding for schools, because we know that our children's educations are at risk right now. And we, in my opinion, we cannot let our children be the main victims of COVID-19. And so, in the Senate, as a citizen, as a voter, for me, job one is to make sure we take care of the least protected among us, and that includes the children. And so I think the question is, how can we channel more funding to our students, not less?
Okay, I like it. I like it. Well, let's continue our transition through these different areas. Legalization of cannabis.
Yeah.
What do you think about that? Some states are really.
I have been a criminal defense. Oh, sorry.
I was just
I
saying,
have been a
a lot of states are bringing in loads of extra revenue that, if used for the right causes, can make a big difference. Tennessee hasn't jumped on board yet.
Yeah, I have been a criminal defense attorney for the majority of my 25-year career plus. I have seen the damage that our draconian laws against drugs, including cannabis, and the violence that it creates, the poverty that it creates, the problems in foreign countries that we've created because of our attempt at prohibition when it comes to marijuana and other drugs. In particular, the effect on African American men of our war on drugs has been devastating. And I cannot in good conscience continue that. I think that if we would treat drugs like a public health problem rather than as a criminal problem, particularly a criminal problem where we can direct the entire weight of the state against our African American male population, then we will produce a much fairer, much better society. It was interesting to me throughout my career. When we had crack, we had a war on drugs. That was African Americans. When we had meth, that was poor white people mainly, and we had a war on drugs. But when we had a problem with opioids, which mainly or to a large extent affected wealthier white people, we had a public health crisis. And so I think that the treatment we had towards those three drug epidemics is a good example of how we should really look at the mirror and say, you know what, maybe this whole prohibition approach is wrong. Maybe we should treat this as a public health crisis like we did for the opioid epidemic. And then that will require us to figure out how to take care of an entire generation of African American males and reincorporate them into society in a way that will make us richer, happier, more stable, at peace. I mean, I have to say, based on my career, that is what I've seen, and I am very adamant that I believe that's the way we should go.
Well, man, I think you touched on a lot of sore spots for a lot of people, and I'm glad that you did. And I mean, at this point, it is not a secret that in particular, the crack epidemic and the flushing in of cocaine and crack into our urban communities, was not something that was driven and molded and shaped by those who living in the areas. It was brought in to fund some other initiative by our government, and it's very rare that you hear candidates take a stand on that, and you don't hear any elected officials hardly take ownership on behalf of our federal government for orchestrating what has become a travesty in America with the high school to prison pipeline that is stronger than the American economy at this point.
I can do no other. I encourage everybody to look at the movie 13th. It'll give you a little flavor if you're not aware of the system. And when people ask me, do you really believe there's systemic racism? I will always use the fact we know there are far more drug dealers who are white than who are black, but there are far more drug dealers who are black in prison than white drug dealers. And until that changes, we have a nice little barometric measurement to figure out what is our criminal justice system doing. And in my experience, it's unconscionable. Like I said, I can do no other. And if I get criticized for it, if I lose on this, it's a fight worth fighting. I will use what we did with crack cocaine as an example. We had 100-to-1 disparity that we got rid of for 17-to-1 disparity, which has no basis whatsoever. It's another way of saying that we're just going to hurt people, particularly African American males, a little bit less than we are unfairly hurting them now. And we can do better than that. We can do better than that. And believe me, once you take the profit out of drugs, you're going to redirect all of our urban economies to being productive economies. You're going to redirect the work of a lot of really smart individuals from trying to figure out how to distribute an illegal substance to trying to figure out how to distribute something legal and that's beneficial and productive for society. We created the world that the drug world operates in. And once we dismantle that world, we've got to be there to build a better, productive world going forward. And that's what my whole campaign is about. So anyway, that's where I stand, and I'll stand here forever.
Yeah, and I think you hit on a very, very big point. I think I don't know who it is that said this, but the quote is that you can't stab a man in the back to pull the knife out halfway and call it progress. You know, he still has his back. Yeah.
Yes.
So, I think that you just walked on that parallel and made that point clearly. So let me go ahead and pull this up, and this is a part A and B question. One, what are your thoughts on the restoration of voting rights for those who have successfully completed their sentence for a felony conviction? But here's the follow-up. Should felons have their voting rights taken in the first place?
I can answer the first one clearly and unequivocally. The answer is yes to your first question. Should we restore Voting Rights Act after people have served their sentence? Absolutely. You know, I always think that it's funny because when we look back at the Civil War, one of the things that we did as a country was we took all of the Confederates who had waged war against the United States, and we restored their voting rights. Why? So that we could reincorporate them into society as a whole and return to one productive nation. Well, once you incarcerate so many people, particularly people of color, then you have to ask the question, what do you intend to do, Mark Pickrell? What do you intend to do, Mark Pickrell, to restore people back to one whole nation? And by saying you can never vote again is a way of telling those people they're never really going to be part of my society. I think that's a huge mistake for me and for them and for everybody. And as far as eliminating voting rights during the time of incarceration, I got to tell you that's something I've never really thought about. We are so far from protecting people who have served their time that I haven't even thought about how far should we go in protecting people. I have to assume that I can trust people who are serving their time to be able to vote. It's not something that I've given a lot of thought about, I'm sorry to say. But right now, because your first question, we're so far from addressing as a country, I haven't been able to get to the second question. I'll have to think about it some more. I know where my heart is. I just, it's something that we, again, it's part of why I'm running is because we have to get our whole society working together. I can't just go tell people, hey, if I can get 51%, I'm going to ram these laws down your throats. Because that means if that other guy can get 51%, then he can ram his laws down my throat. So part of what I want us to do as a country is to start building that common ground and trying to listen more than we dictate and trying to persuade more than we order. And so, on your second question, I think ultimately my answer to that over time would be a function of listening to the people who don't want to give any felons the voting rights and why and what is their goal there, and persuade and to listen. And if I can change their attitude, particularly towards the first question, I think we've got a shot at changing their hearts toward the second. But that's going to take some time, and that's what political leadership is. It is not going in and saying, if I can just win with a bare majority, then I'm going to get everything shoved down your throat, because that majority switches back and forth, and we've got to start working as an entire people, not as just two camps constantly at war with one another.
Mm-hmm. And I think it's important that we touch on a big topic, which is criminal justice reform. I understand that you're a defense attorney and you've got a wealth of experience and knowledge in these areas. Tell the voters your thoughts on criminal justice reform and give them some insight into and perspective on ways that we can move forward and improve our criminal justice system.
Sure. It's been a real privilege for me to be an appellate attorney in our civil system for the last 28 years. I clerked on our Court of Appeals, and I've been a lawyer there for virtually my entire career. I've had some of the most important criminal justice wins in the Sixth Circuit. I've won a case, Jewett versus O'Day, White v. Warden, United States versus Williams, which is one of the most important federal sentencing cases. And it's because of that work that I was ultimately asked to represent Centoya Brown in her last federal appeal. I represented her at the time that her sentence was commuted by the governor. And so it really is the heart of my practice has been as a criminal defense attorney, trying to reform our criminal system, in particular, our federal criminal system. There are so many changes I would like to make that I really can't list them all, but it is everything from sentencing reform to reducing mandatory minima to trying to change a lot of the effects of post sentencing effects on people, and it's everything from Jinx Act to no knock warrants and things like that we have to change. I could literally give you dozens of changes that, based on my long career, I would like to make. But ultimately, I want people to understand that I have been privileged to see the dark underbelly of our criminal justice system, and I think that it's very important. And I'm running as a U.S. Senate candidate, because we have got to change how we treat people who are involved in criminal justice, particularly African Americans and people of color. And so that's a big motivator for me, and that's my background, and that's part of why I was appointed by the U.S. Civil Rights Commission to their Tennessee Advisory Committee.
Let's go a little deeper in this area. Let's talk
Okay.
about social justice, civil rights, and race relations in America. We have
Okay.
The Black Lives Matter movement, which was re-energized in the light of what happened with Breonna Taylor, and then we had what happened with George Floyd, and the list is so long. Philando Castile and Trayvon Martin, even going back far beyond, farther back beyond and before Trayvon Martin. And
yes,
the list goes on. So, what do you think about race relations in America?
we got a whole lot of work to do, starting with the man in the mirror for each of us. And I already mentioned this once, that it is that my economic program is based upon and imbued with the idea that we cannot have social justice or racial justice in this country and still we create an economic foundation of economic justice. So that is my big motivation. In my personal life, like I said, as an appellate lawyer, I've been involved in criminal justice reform for decades of my career. I've worked on Voting Rights Act cases. Because of my work with criminal justice reform and the Voting Rights Act, I was appointed to the Tennessee Advisory Committee of the U.S. Civil Rights Commission, and I look forward to doing that work. I think the work of the commission is extremely important. Now it's as important as ever during the life of the commission. And so that's where I am dedicated towards working. And I think that what we have to understand is, for all of us, that as we build up a society where people are freer to pursue their own goals and their own ideas of life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, and as we make sure that everybody, particularly people without regard to their ethnic background, skin color, race, that as we build a system that is designed to protect everybody, we will have to, and we will be the beneficiaries of a much better world. I will use housing as a good example. We know that the housing laws, one of the things that happened after World War II was HUD, the VA, the variety of housing programs we have greatly benefited white people to the disadvantage of black people. And then when we create an economy that benefits wealth over people who work, we compounded the racial effect of those public policy choices. And so the question for all of us is, and I hope particularly every African American will ask the question, what is the best system and structure for us as a nation to build a future that will be protective of everybody particularly without regard to race? Within, and this is something that I said to some Panhellenic Society people here in Nashville, and I got some criticism and I got some praise for it. We have to remember the discussion that took place among Booker T. Washington and W.E.B. Du Bois, um, George Washington Carver, over 100 years ago, where African Americans had to ask this basic question of, do I need to be separate from and independent from the nation's economy as a whole, or can I integrate and build a life within that system? Now, I think it's our job all as citizens, as a voter, to make a system that is fair and free for everybody. But I think particularly for people who are from disadvantaged groups, particularly African Americans, then what I want to do as a senator is provide that platform for individual people, regardless of their circumstances, to be able to make the choices that will let them build wealth, build economic security. And from that, you build families and communities and churches and businesses. And so that's really where I'm coming from, and that's my motivation for my economic platform. It's not on there. It's not something I said, hey, this is a social justice program, or hey, this is a racial justice program. But I want everybody to understand that is what it is. And I, as a white male, will benefit from that world. I've already benefited from MLK and the promise and the hope of a society that has overcome the legacies of slavery. I've already been the beneficiary of that as an individual. My job is to make sure that those opportunities are available to everybody in this country. And that's what motivates me, and that's what motivates the platform that I've got on my website.
Okay. Well, let's we have three more issues that we want to talk about in the lightning round, and then we'll get to our big question at the end.
Okay.
So I'll dive into the first one, which will be cracking down on cybercrime in a world that now is becoming more technologically advanced.
Yes, no, I think that obviously that we have always had wire fraud statute. So the federal government actually has made illegal all cybercrime. Some of the issues we're going to have to deal with are going to be personal privacy issues, protecting our privacy online, in particular when it comes to the collection of data by businesses and the collection of data by governments of us as individuals. This is a particularly dangerous area where if you really looked at the metadata on my cell phone, sorry, it just rang, but if you look at the metadata on my cell phone, you would really be able to track me as an individual, and you'd be able to define me in ways that most people could not 20 years ago. And so I do think that when it comes to cybercrime, our biggest issues are probably going to have to do with personal privacy. Europe has led with some of the right to be forgotten laws and some of their privacy regs. California has pursued those as well. I think that there will be a role in the next session of Congress for the Congress to take on protection of personal privacy online. And if I had my way, I would be a champion of maximum personal privacy online. And that should be a focus, in my opinion, of our laws right now. I have to say, and that involves some restriction on the government's ability to snoop on us. I mean, we should not be proud of a lot of the revelations recently about the snooping that has taken place of the American people and the amount of information that's collected on each of us, in my opinion, unconstitutionally. But certainly it's a problem. It's one that Congress should address. And if I were elected to the Senate, I would address them. Wait, I lost you. Sorry.
I'm back. Can you hear me?
Excellent. Yep.
Okay. So let's go to military spending. How much is enough?
A lot less than we're spending now. From day one of my campaign, one of my deficit reduction platforms involves reducing foreign military spending. We have engaged in never-ending wars, particularly in the Middle East, that have cost us trillions and trillions of dollars. That is money that has been wasted. It has led to the deaths of a lot of innocent people, and it has not made America safer, stronger, or more secure. And so, particularly in a time when we are dealing with COVID, when we are talking about needing to increase funds, but certainly not cutting funds for school children, when we need to rebuild the infrastructure of this country, which is collapsing in many cases when you look at our bridges and roads, we should not be wasting the money on foreign military engagements. I mean, we have been at war in Afghanistan longer than a lot of the soldiers there have been alive. That is a travesty. And, in many respects, if you want to talk about addiction, the addiction that we have to military spending as a nation is one of the worst addictions that we have. And it's going to be tough to break that addiction, but we need to break that addiction as soon as possible.
Okay. Final question before we get to our big one at the end. The right to bear arms versus the need for gun control in America.
Yeah, I would encourage everybody to look at some of my podcasts. I have one specifically on this topic. I think it's podcast number 3. And, one of the things that I say in my series of podcasts is, as a constitutional attorney and as an appellate lawyer, one of my important jobs is to support our independent Supreme Court. And so here the Supreme Court has ruled that the Second Amendment provides an individual right to bear arms. And I actually support that decision. I think the language of the amendment makes sense. And I think the Supreme Court's decision in Heller makes sense, that there is a basic right to bear arms. But as with all rights, there are limits. I mean, there's nothing that's unlimited in our law, no matter what it is. And so we know, particularly with these mass shootings, that we have issues involving mental health. We have issues involving the lethality of these 45, 50, 100 bullet magazines. Those are the sorts of things that we have to address. We have issues with background checks and people's right to own arms. We talk about felon disenfranchisement, but we have felon in possession laws that keep felons from possessing arms, and yet we don't have background checks to make sure that that set of laws protects society. Instead, it becomes a trap for a lot of people. And so when it comes to weighing our constitutional right to bear arms, we have to make reasonable, rational judgments to protect ourselves as a society from mentally unstable people, from people who would choose to try to kill many, many innocent people, and to try to make sure that people who shouldn't have guns don't have them. And so that's why I've given you 3 examples, but there are a lot where we can have reasonable, rational controls over our right to bear arms while still positively affirming our right to bear arms and understanding that each of us does have that right under our Constitution.
Understood. Well stated. Well, here's our big question. So you're a senator of the state of Tennessee, right? You're taking a look at the state. Do a SWOT analysis for us. Tell us what our greatest strength, weakness, opportunity is, and what you would identify as the greatest threat to us moving from where we are today to where we can be tomorrow.
I may be a little bit repetitive here. If I am, I apologize, because I'm going to focus on economics. Our strengths are our people. If I have learned one thing over the last few months campaigning across this state, it's that the people of Tennessee are incredibly wonderful, whether you are in Memphis or Mountain City, whether you're in Union City or you're in Hamilton County. Across this state, people are good, hardworking, fair-minded, even-handed, live and let live kind of people. I don't care what the environment is. And so I consider the people of this state to be by far our greatest strength. Our weakness is in our political leadership in both parties. I think there's enough blame to go around, and we need to address it. We have let these problems fester, whether it's drugs, wars abroad, economic problems, education problems, housing problems. We have been at each other's throats for so long, we forgot what it's like to try to reach common ground and solve problems with people whom we may disagree with on things. And I think that's our greatest weakness. One of the things that I plan to do in this campaign, and I've done my best to do, is to be positive, upbeat, and constructive. Because I don't think there's any way that we can take advantage of our strengths. If we as political leaders do not work together to actually solve problems, putting people above politics and solving problems above our own careers, money, or what have you. And I think that's so our weakness is our political leadership. Opportunities, we can fix this. The opportunity is there for us to work together, to find common ground. There's a lot of common ground that we have across the political spectrum in a variety of different cities, rural areas, different parts of the country. We can work together if we just have, I believe, political leadership who's willing to pay the price. And that means get criticized and maybe lose an election. I don't ever want to be in the position where I care more about being in office or staying in office than I care about doing what the people of this state and this country need. And so that's the great opportunity. And as far as threats, it is that we will stay at each other's throats, that we will let anger and hatred and fear dominate over love and reason and civility. If that's the biggest threat, again, is that man in the mirror. It's us. We people have great strength, and these are great people, but we can choose to tear ourselves down. And I don't care what the subject is. When I see it, and I've experienced it as a candidate now, so let me tell you, there's a lot of hate out there too. But the hate, I've found, can be dealt with when you deal with it with some respect, some humility, some calm, some patience, some understanding. And so that's why the threat is also us, because each of us as an individual and as a group and as a state and as a country has got to figure out how to take the hate and the anger and the negativity and the criticism and the ego and the money off the table and put the things that are more excellent onto the table. And so that's what I see as our biggest threat too. And I want to help change that. The way I run is to try to be an example for what positive change looks like. And that's my goal here.
Well, I think you did an awesome job, and we are so excited that you came on the show today to share with us.
Thank you.
So we're going to give you the last word. I'm going to give some quick information to our viewers and those who are voting, and then we will turn it over to you to make your final pitch and tell the people why you're the best candidate and why you should, why you deserve their vote, and then we'll be wrapping up. So if you're watching, I want you to know that everyone can make a difference, and one vote can be the difference. One vote has a lot of power, but 50 votes, we pick up momentum. With 100 votes, our votes together become a powerful hammer. With 1,000 votes, we can change an election in a district or in a county commission district or a city council district. But with 10,000 votes, we can impact what happens across this state. We have power in Shelby County. We have power in Tennessee. We just have to use it. And so I'll end with saying this. Voting is a part of the fight. We cannot be advocates for change if we are not also advocates for civic responsibility. So get out to vote. There's one other piece that you need to add on the list of things that you have to check off you being responsible as a citizen, and that is participating in the census. We've got to come to our census and complete the census survey. It's important because by completing the census survey, we ensure that our district lines will be drawn fairly, and we also ensure that the federal dollars that will come to Tennessee that are allocated for Shelby County will actually get here, and then the right amounts, so that our community that needs those resources to continue moving forward can have access to them. So please take 10 minutes out of your busy schedules and complete the census survey. And if you have already received your absentee ballots, today is the day. Mail it today, and make sure you get that ballot sent in. If you have any questions or concerns about delivering that ballot, you call the election commission and flood the line. You email the election commission and you flood the line. Make sure your ballot gets counted. There are issues brewing, and we plan to address those issues. But make sure you do your part. If you have your ballot, get that ballot in. And so with that being said, at the bottom of the screen, you see a website. It's www.pickrell2020.net. And that's the website where you can find more information about Mark Pickrell and the various ideas and his campaign platform that he's shared with us today. And I'm going to now pause and give our guest, Mark Pickrell, an opportunity to close us out and talk to you, voter the candidate directly, and explain why he deserves your vote. Mike is yours.
Well, thank you, Mr. Harris. I really appreciate this opportunity. This has been a lot of fun for me. It's one of the best things about campaigning. And I'm maybe a little bit different here. I usually am, because I'm not going to tell everybody listening that they should vote for me. Instead, what I want every Democrat who's listening to this to think about is who running for Senate in the Democratic primary has the best chance of winning the statewide contest in November. The entire purpose of a primary is to pick your champion to go win in November. From day one, I've structured my campaign to win in November. I believe that I have the ability, the connections, the background, the platform, and the approach that has the best chance of winning in November. And that's those are the choices I've made. But like you said, the key to voting is not what I think. It's what every voter thinks when they go in that voting booth. And so I would ask every Democrat listening to this interview to think about is which of the Democratic candidates has the best chance of winning in November. And if you think it's me, please, I ask for your vote. If you think it's somebody else, I ask you to vote for them. Because this race is not about me winning for me. It's not about me winning for the ideas I think that are important. It's about you deciding what you think is the best way for this party to get the best candidate to win in November. We have not won an open seat in the Senate in 30 years. We've not won a statewide seat in 18 years. That is a legacy of failure and frustration. That is one of the things that motivated me to run for this office, because I believed in April when I signed up for the ballot, and I believe it now, that I am one of the best chances we have to win the Senate seat this year. But ultimately, that decision is up to you. And I want to reiterate what Mr. Harris said in closing. Your vote matters. It matters because you matter. It matters because your opinions matter. It matters because your participation in our society matters. It matters because people made great sacrifices for each of us to be able to vote. And so whatever you do, no matter who you vote for, make sure you vote. And if it's for me, thank you. Have a great week. General election is this Thursday.
All righty. Well, you heard it from the man himself, Mr. Mark Pickrell. I've enjoyed this interview. Thank you so much for joining us on today. And we look forward to seeing great things from you. And we wish you good luck as you prepare to make it through this final stretch of this campaign season, the primary phase. So thank you for joining us, and
thank you.
Have a good day.
You too. Bye.